Hey, get in, fellas. We're going back to therapy after a 2-week holiday break. And let me tell y'all, for the team here, Get In Fellas Pod, it felt much like holiday winter break when you were a kid, a full 2 weeks off to reset. I know I had a really good holiday, and I'm sure, and I hope, can't be sure, that everyone else out here did too. All right, so it's a big week here on the Get In Fellas Pod. During this break, we managed to finalize our website. It is cool, it is bright, and it has merchandise that you can buy. So just like all our other Instagrams and handles and email addresses, it's getinfellaspod.com. And we're stoked, y'all. You can see the episodes there. The Bromotions Hall of Fame members have features. And, of course, all the swag and merch that you could imagine. So if you see something and you want a certain item or you want a certain thing in a certain color, just holler at us because it only takes a few seconds and we're happy to make customized stuff for people if they're interested. This week on the show, it is our first episode of the new year. And so me, Richie, and Mike are going to be talking about our New Year's resolutions while we learn a bit about New Year's resolutions themselves. Then a really cool, maybe the favorite interview I've done so far, no offense to anybody else. We're going to be talking interventions today with my good friend Keith Bradley, who is a professional interventionist. The way I'm seeing this is we've been in that preparation stage. Then next week we'll be in the action stage. So this is like if preparation goes wrong. If someone in your life is not yet ready to get into treatment and yet it's really messing them up, then a family members may go beyond them and seek help of an interventionist to help get them into treatment. We'll wrap with everybody's favorite wizard, Mr. Harry Potter. Our Bromotions Hall of Fame inductee will be Daniel Radcliffe, who had to overcome a drinking problem himself on his way to becoming an adult. Child stardom, really a theme here that we're hearing. So going to be a great episode today. Welcome back after the break. Let's go. All right, welcome to January 8th episode. If we're time stamping, we're shooting this right before the 4:25 kickoff. So the Bengals' fate is on the lines in the hands of the Jets and one Carson Wentz. I'm not optimistic. How you boys doing? Happy Sunday.
Well, your Bengals beat my Steelers last night, so
yes, we sure did. I'm
not interested in football.
What a beatdown it was. Yeah, Trey Hendrickson, NFL sack leader. Let's go.
Got to watch the Patriots blow the first overall pick. It was fantastic. So the Bills winning in a loss feels great.
Yeah. It's interesting with these week 18 matchups amongst divisional opponents. Like, how often will teams try to win or not win based on draft stock and things like that? So it's pretty interesting. Given that this is our first episode of the year, we have come up with New Year's resolutions as individuals with a little bit of data and mental health thinking about New Year's resolutions to inform you as we do here. And then I don't know if Richie or Mike's ready, but I would like to think about the podcast at large and what our New Year's resolutions are for the podcast. So we'll see how that part of the recording goes. A little bit of background information on New Year's resolutions. This data is according to the American Psychiatric Association. They do a monthly poll called Healthy Minds, and this was on New Year's resolutions in December. 2,200 adults, so a pretty fair sample size. 81% of Americans, 4 out of 5, will commit to a New Year's resolution, and that data certainly skews younger. Boys, do you think as you've gotten older that you've done resolutions more or less? Less.
Definitely way less.
100%.
Way less. I honestly don't even know if I do them anymore. So 33% of those New Year's resolutions are mental health related, which is actually up 5% from last year. Michael, I actually know what Richie is planning on doing for his. What is your New Year's resolution for the people?
Ironically, I'll start by saying I don't feel like I do as much New Year's resolutions because I feel like as an adult, I tend to just set goals as I go. If I need to set a goal, I set a goal. However, I'd say my big one, ironically, with socials is less time glued to my phone. That means doing a lot more work ahead of time so that I don't have to have it out, during family time, things like that.
Yeah. According to this study, Michael, amongst people who are setting mental health-based goals, less time on social media is the 6th most popular of those mental health-based goals, less time on social media. So we'll get to that. Some interesting thoughts on if people are setting mental health-related goals, the things over social media. Number one, 39% of people are talking about physical fitness. You're going to hear me say this on this podcast over and over again, guys. Food body and exercise is a pervasive theme in this country for everybody all the time, slept on. We need to keep talking about it. 38% were related to money. 25% were their social status and relationships. Should certainly be higher. And 25% were diet related. So physical fitness and diet related, again, 65% of the pop. I mean, I know I've set resolutions around exercise and weight loss before. I don't want to pretend like I'm holier than thou, but it's something that's just hugely important around this time of year. We all know about the first of the year, the gym blows up. How long do people hang on? How long does it stay crowded for?
Yeah. Do you have any data on how long those health and fitness resolutions last generally?
That's a good question. I didn't get any of that off the data I pulled. I was looking at, Mike, you want to be our researcher in the background here, but I was looking at something that talked about the second Friday of January being the most common day for people to drop on their New Year's resolutions, which makes sense to me because the first weekend, you're yeah, I got this, and you're all motivated and going strong. And then by the time the second weekend rolls around, you're the playoffs for the football, or fuck it, just generally. I think that makes a lot of sense as the date, maybe even dry January is a pretty new trend in the grand scheme of things. So I wonder how much percent
I don't have the data on specifically exercise, but just in general, 25% of people commit beyond 30 days. So that's a pretty low number when you think you're talking just a month.
One in four people commit to the resolutions beyond a month. That's honestly feels about right.
Yeah, I don't have the exact website.
I would have guessed lower,
but and only 6% of 1,000 U.S. adults who had a New Year's resolution stuck beyond a year, which I think a year is a decent chunk, especially if you're talking exercise. But
which gets to our advice, that I want to give on the podcast about New Year's resolutions is, Mike made a really good point here. A part of maturity is not about making whole lifestyle changes and I'm going to start exercising 5 days a week, right? It's to set change that can make, actionable change in our life that shouldn't be extreme, that can be built into our current lifestyle. So if you don't like to exercise, don't set your goal as exercising 5 days a week. If you like candy, don't say that you're never going to have a piece of candy again, right? Let's set what we call SMART goals. You guys heard of SMART goals? It's pretty common these days, that acronym.
This is what I did last week in class. So
with your kids?
Yeah, I did. Although we didn't use the acronym SMART, but it's the same idea. Same with keeping it within a timeline, specific, measurable, attainable.
Specific. You're so close, Mike. You got him.
Measurable, retainable. The R is killing me. T is within a time frame, I believe.
Time bound. Yeah. So SMART goals, guys. Specific. That was good, Mike. That was good. Specific, measurable, attainable, or achievable, relevant, and time bound. So in that way, I have patients who've said to me certain goals. Oh, I want to exercise more. Well, that is a goal that is destined to fail because what the fuck does that mean, right? If you never exercise, then sure, going 1 day a week is achievable for you. But to that same point, specific, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to, elliptical for 20 minutes, 3 days a week because that's achievable. It's relevant because I do want to be healthier physically. Time sensitive is, again, 3 days a week for the year of 2025. So when we're doing things like that, we're setting ourselves up for success. And most importantly, we're setting ourselves up for success in a way that is able to be built into our lifestyle. For my lifestyle, Richie, I'm going to hold on to yours last because you have the best New Year's resolution of the squad. With some shame, I come and say that I had my first root canal in December of 2024. And let me tell you, it fucking blows. I thought I do a good job with my dental health. I floss. I have an electric toothbrush. And so consistent, daily flossing, right? There's really no turning back. I mean, they put the fear of God in me because apparently we weren't that far away from having to take the whole tooth. Improved dental health, if I'm doing that in a smart way, it would be I'm going to floss every night and I'm going to use mouthwash in addition to toothbrushing twice a day. That seems achievable to me. Let's pray, everybody, that I'm not back in the dental chair as often in 2025. You guys ever had a root
solid
canal?
Goal.
I'm going to add not shaming you for your dental health as part of my New Year's resolution.
Bro.
I want to so badly be like, Steven, how did we get to this point? But
shout out our loyal KGB boy, Chef Max Wertheim, who's had to have a bunch of dental work done. It's like genetic in his family to have shitty teeth. I feel you, bro. I didn't understand when you were going through it, and now I felt like I was supportive. If not, my bad. Richie, talk about you have the best New Year's resolution of the squad. Let's see your progress too.
Similar to like what Mike was saying, I'm not big on like resolutions. I would say I'm more of just like setting a goal for the year, something like that. So my goal for 2025 is to learn how to do the finger whistle, because
it's not good.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I have no idea how to do it. So my goal for 2025 is to learn how to do a finger whistle, because I'm not that great at regular whistling either. So maybe I can improve both of those.
I want you to really stick to it. I want you to know, as somebody who also had that goal at one point in their life, I never achieved it, and so I'd like to see
like
how you
in that 75% you drop.
You know, but you gotta be careful too. You know, in a world of pandemic and post-pandemic, the spitting everywhere, it's got to be. Just be aware, you know. But I give you all the power for it. Tell me how you get there.
I believe in you, Richie. It's the only thing that can wake Rambo up from a nap, I assume.
Exactly. That and the smell of food.
Yeah, other fun stats before we get into some resolutions for the podcast itself, guys. 63% of people, again, are setting exercise-related goals for their mental health, 45% meditation or nature-based, and only 31% of people set the goal of seeing a therapist. So I guess that means they're just going to have to be listening to the podcast for their information. But that seems... I mean, I don't know. I think if every year 30% of new people in this country actually saw a therapist, that would be an awesome number. I think realistically it sounds low, but doing the steps to see a therapist is much more intimidating and much more complicated than setting exercise-based goals. The vibe check in America, again, based off a population of 2,200 adults, 67% of people thought their mood was good or excellent. And in interesting and unsurprising terms, that's 84% of people over 65 feel like their mood is either good or excellent, and that drops to 60% of people between 18 and 34. Usually related to finances, uncertainty about the future, and then physical health. Those are the 1, 2, 3 in that category. So 2/3 of people in this country think their mental health is good. That feels surprising.
Yeah.
I think some of that, too, is just the stigma that comes with not having great mental health. And
it's interesting because
admitting that your mental health is not where it needs to be.
Right. And also, like, I think we talk about defenses on this show, like people that are well defended. So that means that, like, you think your life is good, but, like, you know, again, relationships might be tough. You hate your job, but, like, you're managing to you know, kind of make sense of all that in your world. And hopefully that just means that people are doing well and you know, not in rough relationships and are really able to see a bright future for themselves and their families. So podcast related New Year's resolutions, boys. I will start because we're actually kicking ass at this in the next couple of weeks. My one, and these three guys can tell you I've been really annoying about this for a while, is getting a functional website up and running, which we are doing right now, 1 week into the year. So we crushed it. So as you heard in the intro, everybody, get on the website, gettinfellowspod.com, buy some Rambo-based merchandise or some KGB-related merchandise, whatever you want. And the other is I want to do more in-person stuff. More in-person interviews for the podcast, which within the Denver area, that's easy. Clearly, we're not rich enough to be flying people out for interviews, but next week, we're going to be going live to a rehab treatment center here in Denver, where we're going to be using an episode through the eyes of a patient. What does a day in the life of a patient in rehab look like? I'm really excited for that. So we were able to be on site for that and talk with some of the staff. So really looking forward to that next week. Mike, Richie, you got any goals for the pod?
I'm planning with my editing. I want to have everything edited before the Monday before the episode drops. So 2 days early. That way we have everything good to go. And if anything needs to be changed, we have enough of a buffer time, just getting everything set and ready to go and scheduled for our drops, just so we're on a timely schedule and we're not cranking down at the last minute, which I would say the last, I don't know, probably like month, 6 weeks, we've been really good about this, and I just want to keep that going.
Yeah, fun fact about New Year's resolutions. I have no data on this, but when they depend on other people, that's tough because, Richie, that depends on me. So thank you for your note that you would like to continue to be done with editing by Mondays. I agree. We do our weekly podcast meeting, guys, on Tuesday nights, me, Richie, Mike, and Christine. And so I agree. Not having anything to do on Tuesday is important. That's all on purpose. So, Michael, what about you?
Mine is kind of jumps in with the other resolution again with social media, specifically, again, getting things kind of the same mindset of getting things done ahead of time. So getting things done while I can. I started today by planning tomorrow's socials and getting it all ready and scheduled, as opposed to waiting until tomorrow morning and doing it and dealing with potential internet issues, editing issues, etc. So along the same lines as Richie, though, just kind of getting ahead of my work there. I didn't set it up as a smart goal, but it is attainable.
I just think when it comes to some of those like diet and exercise, especially based ones, mental health, if you're going to be doing meditation or any of that kind of stuff, like putting yourself on a reasonable schedule. Guys, that was fun. I hope everyone had a good holiday break. Specifically, Mike, in the intro, I did not shout out. My apologies. Mike really didn't get much of a holiday break because we continued to post things while Richie, Christine, and I did more of a refresh recharge. Richie and I worked on the website a little bit, but Mike, thank you for your ongoing work during the holidays. Your check will be in the mail when people start buying stuff on the website. So
please buy things.
Here we go, guys. Mike's family will go hungry unless you're buying merch. So,
and listeners, we'd love to hear your resolutions. So feel free to comment on our post. Let us know. Send them in. Whatever you'd want. It'd be great to get some interaction from you guys.
All right, y'all. All right. We'll be back with a super cool interview. I got the chance and pleasure to meet Keith Bradley, who is a professional interventionist. It ain't like the TV show, people. It's better than that. All right. See you after the break. Hey, Keith, do you have any vocal exercises you'd like to warm us up with? Any fee, fi, fo, fum? You know, you've got this lovely, deep bass baritone voice. You know, I could see you being a singer.
It was at one point.
Yeah, yeah. Anything notable? You were a musical drama man?
Yeah, musical and drama.
Yeah. I was in musicals in high school, Keith. You got any ones to name? I was in Little Shop of Horrors.
The best one that I enjoyed the most was Mall and the Night Visitors.
That's awesome. Well, we're very lucky to have on Keith Bradley today, who is a professional interventionist. Right, like you've seen the TV show Interventions. We all understand the construct. And here in the addiction block, we were thinking about preparation stage of change before we took our holiday break. And here's an intervention, which is basically like, what if my loved one can't get to the preparation stage? What if they won't go to treatment? And I was really fortunate to be set up with Keith, who does this for a living. He helps families set up interventions and things along those lines. So we're fortunate to have Keith with us. He's a native of Wichita, Kansas. He was actually a professional car salesman. I was the manager of a handful of car dealerships down in Texas before making his way over to Colorado, which makes him now a Broncos fan. And in his free time, his mindful hobby is golfing. Big golfer. Keith, thanks for joining us. We're so lucky to have you.
Thanks for asking.
You know, I barely know, and I gave at the top there as much as I know about interventions. That was all. That was what I got. So tell us what is an intervention and what is your role in them?
Actually, it's a last ditch effort. When somebody's been working with a family member, whether it be a father or a mother or a sibling or a child or whatever it is, they are at the point of desperation. I'm not getting the call that says, hey, I think my middle school kid may have smoked a joint over lunch. That's not the call I'm getting. The call I'm getting is that this is going to kill this person and he won't talk to us at all. Most all of my referrals come from one of two places. The first one would be treatment centers. People call in and say, you know, we've got this son that's a heroin addict that we've been distanced from, and we want to try to help him, and we don't know how. And they say, call this guy. The other source of the referrals that I get, when I first started doing this 19 years ago, I bought a lot of coffee and bagels, and I'd stop in. My business philosophy has always been to try to figure out what nobody else was doing. And nobody was paying any attention to the therapist. So I took coffee and bagels to therapist. I'd wrap myself out a little map every day and make the loop with that. To this day, I get referrals from therapists
I'm sure.
that I'd have a 50-50 chance of picking them out of a crowd of two. I have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
And but so I got this opportunity to do contract interventions for a treatment center up in Estes Park. They were really scrambling, trying to figure out the correct path for them for intervention work. They had their own intervention team at that time, and that wasn't working out. So this, not me, but another person got the contract for these interventions. I don't know exactly how many, but a lot in a year's time. That's what got me on the map. I started to developing marketing. I started educating myself from the standpoint of going to conferences and workshops and all that kind of stuff. And I thought at that point what I wanted to do was I wanted to become a CAC 3 counselor.
Certified addiction counselor, for those not familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. And, when I got all of the CEUs and the CEs for all of that, there was a line on the form that you had to sign that said, once you see somebody on a professional level, you'll never see them on a social level. I wasn't willing to do that. So I got certified in 2 different models. Quite frankly, I don't use either one of them.
Yeah.
And I kind of shoplifted the things I like from both models and combined them to the model that I like the most, which is Love First. The name of my company is Love in Action US, and the name of their book is Love First. And it's Jeff and Deborah J. And if there's some people out there that are really struggling with understanding, there's some incredible information in that book. Yeah. And I read it for the first time on a round trip to California from Colorado. So it's a simple read. Yeah. Yeah. But I forgot what the question was at this point.
I was just thinking that the question was educate our audience who might not know, what is an intervention? Like you said, it's a last ditch effort. And I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence. I think most of us have an idea what an intervention is from pop culture. But the next question is, what are the steps that a family would take? And what's your role? Like you said, a treatment center reaches out to you, maybe a therapist, right? And what's really nice, Keith, is what I'm hearing is whether it be the family or the therapist or the treatment centers, they're at a position of asking for help. So they have put their hands up and they've said, we don't know what to do. And when you're a parent or a loved one of someone struggling with substance, you probably have tried everything at this point. So when they ask for your help, you really are driving the boat. They put a lot of faith in you.
And generally, everything they've tried has been wrong. Yeah. They've tried to fix it with the checkbook. They've tried to do it with making certain that they have a place to live and they have a roof over their head and all those kind of things. And so when I get called on the scene, depending on the situation, a lot of times the first thing that I tell the loved one is you need to shut the checkbook. The willingness goes up when they're no longer, some of these interventions that I do, I'd like to have the guy's gig. He's living in the basement, doing opiates all day long and drinking at night, and they're giving him the money to do it with, eating out of their fridge, no rent, no responsibility. It's time that he put his big boy panties on, so to speak.
Hard for a parent to do that.
It is. It was hard. I have 2 sons that are in recovery. I've sat on every corner of this table. Yeah. And
sure, that's helpful for the families to hear.
You mentioned the show Intervention. What the show Intervention did, in my opinion, and by the way, I have one about everything, was it put intervention on the map. Everybody knows about intervention now. Yeah. For the most part, they use an ultimatum-based model. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah. Can you explain quickly what an ultimatum model is for people who don't watch?
You either do this or we're not going to do this.
Yeah. There we go.
I'm very, very boundary-minded. You're obsessing about your child's an alcoholic or an addict. You wake up with it every morning and you go to bed with it every night.
Of course.
And we start talking about a process of how we're going to get in front of him initially. The first step of when they say they're interested in talking, and I do this for free, the initial consultation's free. Sure. I set up a Zoom meeting. I get all of the prospective members on that Zoom call. And what it does is I use a letter writing process. So what it does at that point, everybody has a copy of the letter writing instructions, and it gives me a good chance to coach them on how to write their letter in an effective letter. One of the first things that I tell everybody is it has to be personal. It can't be hearsay.
Right.
You can't start a statement with "Mom said," that has no effect. But
It's hard for a lot of people, Keith.
How it's affected them directly is the direction we start in. By the time I get done with the Zoom call, and the Zoom call is usually 60 to 90 minutes, the initial Zoom call. And by the end of that call, I know who's going to be my biggest hurdle to get on board. I also know who's the most emotional person on the team.
Yeah.
And I'm gathering information during that, disguised by teaching them how to write an effective letter. And I can accomplish the whole thing.
Yeah.
That one Zoom call. And I don't ever ask for a commitment at the end of that Zoom call. I tell them I want them to talk amongst each other. And generally within 2 or 3 days, they call me back and say, hey, we want to move forward.
Yeah.
And
it's not like there's a lot of interventionists to shop, or maybe there are a lot. I have no idea. But when you've already given them 90 minutes of your time, they're probably in.
The problem with that is when you Google the interventions, it doesn't tell you which ones are successful and which ones are doing their first intervention,
Not much different than a therapist or a doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
The process of the intervention after the Zoom call and after they tell me they want to get on board is we pick a date. I always get there the night before. I do what we call a family meeting practice rehearsal in generally the hotel that I'm staying in. So we don't have to worry about the addicted person walking in while we're doing the family meeting, which I've had happen, by the way, but not ever in a hotel. That meeting is probably more emotional than the intervention itself because I have everybody read their letter at that meeting. Some of the times, Stephen, they're saying things that they've never said out loud.
I'm sure.
And the purpose of that meeting is I want them to know how that feels. At that meeting, we make plans for things that we anticipate what the objections are going to be. And you would be amazed at the number of people that say the biggest objection here is going to be, what are we going to do with the dog?
That actually does not surprise me at all, Keith. People pets are a protective factor against suicide. They're a protective factor, but in the same way, they stop us from doing a lot of
service animals out there that don't have jackets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, so we have a plan in place about a trusted loved one that's going to take the dog while the person's in treatment. Or I'm familiar, especially in our area, with all of the places to board that are good. Yeah. We have a cat that's 15 years old. And when we go out of town, we board the cat. We always board it in the same place. So in this area, I've got a relationship with the cat hotel. I didn't make that up. That's really a place.
Yeah. But for those unaware, Greeley is in northeastern Colorado. It's the University of Northern Colorado, home of Luke McCaffrey for NFL football fans. And it's up near Nebraska, if you're not familiar with this part of the world geography-wise. So I like giving some Americans geography lessons because before I moved here from Ohio, I didn't know where Wyoming was on the map, so I've had to learn a lot about this region.
We're actually closer to Wyoming than we are Nebraska.
Fair. Yes.
But by the time we get done with that family meeting practice rehearsal, I know who's going to go first and who's going to go last. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I put the mom in the last position.
It's like you're making a pitching rotation.
Yeah, but there's a lot of interventions that we don't ever get to the last letter being read. And if anybody deserves a break, it's her.
Yeah,
of
course.
So the most emotional person that I talked about, they got the lead.
They go, yeah, of course. We got to drop everybody's defenses, and whoever is going to get up there and let it start. I agree with you. That's your leadoff batter, your Ichiro Suzuki, your Mookie Betts, just naming some baseball guys. But Right. You want somebody to help bring the emotional tone to the table. I could see that. It makes perfect sense.
I want to get the emotion going early on.
Yeah.
And once I see that emotion in the individual we're doing the intervention with, I start mashing on that emotion. Not physically, but I'm going to make things uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm not going to disrespect anyone, but my job is to make things uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
a person struggling with addiction, especially substance use like you work with, they're not comfortable being uncomfortable. That is the source of the addiction, is they are masking.
As soon as they get uncomfortable, they have another drink.
Yeah, drink, drug, whatever. Yeah.
Another pill, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm watching I'm watching body language. I know going in who is resented the most. I call it the AP, the addicted person. I know who has the biggest resentment with who that the AP has with the member of the team. Yeah. And I deal with that early on. When I introduce myself on an intervention, I say, by the way, we've got a flight here in 4 hours that we need to be on. And 100% of the time,
it scares the shit out of the AP, man. Like, what the fuck?
100% of the time, they look at me and say, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And my reply always is, I understand that. All I'm asking you to do is sit down and respect the people that are here and listen to what they have to say. I don't say, they've all written a letter for you. Because as soon as you say that, he's out.
Yeah.
Or she's out.
Yeah.
So everything is...
Sorry to interrupt you. You just made that point for the first time. You're like he or she, which of course there's going to be interventions for both genders. But, we're a podcast for everybody, but generally with a male slant. What percentage of interventions that you see are for men versus women of the APs? And then we'll get back on track with the process because this is super interesting. I just popped into my head.
70% are men.
That feels right. Yeah.
And 30%. And I'm 72 years old, so I'm safe for both genders. And normally, by the end of the intervention, and this surprises a lot of people, we've created a bond. I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was dealing with an opiate addict. I'm an opiate addict in recovery. And I looked up at him and I said, your hair is sweating, isn't it? His eyes got real big and he said, how did you know that? I said, because my hair used to sweat. You can only describe it if you have experienced it,
Yeah, I'm sure that's really meaningful for people. I think about this on the show all the time where like doctors and therapists, can get so far with addiction treatment, but peer counselors, AA, right, having been in their shoes is really valuable to help disarm people whose obviously defenses are way up.
In my situation, and I'm not saying this is mandatory, I'm just talking about me here. It's my biggest asset.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got a pretty good education. I didn't want therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists down talking to me. From my own personal use, I got a pretty good knowledge of what's a benzone, what's an opiate, and what the side effect is because I lived it.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I want to clarify that again, it's of significant value for me to talk about my own experience.
Sure.
And watch his or her eyes come open. For the most part, they've been dealing with a family that's not addicted. And for the first time, they've got somebody in their living room that knows what's up,
Yeah.
Back to how this started. And by the way,
all of a sudden you become their best ally in the room.
Yeah. I told
Interestingly,
Michael when he mentioned doing this podcast, I said, you need to let the guy know if he asks me what time it is, I'm going to tell him how to build a watch. And that's
okay. We can always edit the fluff, Keith.
Right. That's kind of who I am. But
yeah, preach, brother. You're in good company.
But I'm watching for body language, and I'm watching for emotion, and whatever it was that was in the letter that got the emotion going. I'm going back after the letter has been read, and the best way to describe it is I'm going to mash on that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get as much emotion going as early on as I can. The other thing is people ask me all the time, they say, what do we do if he agrees to go? We got 6 people on the team and he agrees to go. And I said, intervention's over. When I do interventions, I like ottomans because they're mobile.
Yeah.
And I like to
Who's
move
on the
one
ottoman,
back.
the AP or you? Like shifting around, Who's mobile?
And I'm listening for what the AP is saying. And as soon as he says or she says, can I smoke there? We're going to be in the car in 30 minutes.
At rehab?
Yeah.
Most rehab facilities let you smoke cigarettes, right? They'd have no business if they couldn't.
There's a lot of rehabs that still do.
Question mark, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Most rehabs that I work with treat that addiction also.
Harm reduction, though. Obviously, we need people quitting smoking, but harm reduction strategy,
Well, you can Google about anything these days, and if you Google stopping smoking and chewing at the same time you're getting treated for alcoholism and drug addiction, the rate of success is higher.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
It truly is, because you're still stimulating the brain. That's what you're seeking. As soon as I get an indication, like, can I smoke there? How long do I have to be there? He's taken possession mentally, dragging my ottoman up so I can be eye to eye with the person. And I do 100% of my own transports.
Oh.
I've already got a relationship established. Sometimes it's not good. Most of the time it is.
Yeah.
And I know how to get them through the airport. The guy's intoxicated. The smartest thing you can do when you book the tickets, I book all of the tickets for myself and for the AP. And the reason I do that puts us on the same itinerary. I've got status with a couple of airlines in particular. And if there's 2 seats in the front of the plane, we're getting moved up. And because we're on the same itinerary, he gets moved with me, or she gets moved with me. And they're much easier to manage up there. When I booked the tickets, I booked them a wheelchair because I don't have any idea what kind of condition they're going to be in when we arrive at the airport. So if it's a wheelchair, they're much easier to manage.
Have you ever had anybody like go into withdrawal or anything like unsafe in that transit time?
I've had people have seizures.
Seizures, yeah.
Grand mal seizures at 40,000 feet. So long as 5 minutes of your life. I've had them have seizures in the front seat of my car.
Yeah.
This is controversial. I'll go ahead and put that out there.
Yeah, I was wondering how many people are the transport in addition to the interventionist. That's something.
The very thing with an alcoholic that causes seizures will keep it from happening. Before we get on the plane, I reach my hands out and I ask the people to put their hands in my hands. I want to find out if they're vibrating from the inside out.
The tremors are already coming.
Yeah, and if we've got some of that going on, I'm getting them a cocktail.
Yeah.
That's controversial.
We talked about it on this show, Keith, how, during COVID, we had to keep liquor stores open to prevent people from going into alcohol withdrawal. And so we've hammered on the fact that you can die from alcohol withdrawal.
Well, let me give you a fact.
Yeah.
More people die from withdrawal from alcohol than heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and benzos combined.
From the withdrawal or the use?
Withdrawal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really dangerous for somebody to stop abruptly. Like in my case, I didn't get clean and sober till I was 52. I did experience seizures.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, so.
Yeah, I've seen that stuff. I've worked in the ICU, Keith, before during my intern year and stuff, and saw a lot of alcohol withdrawal seizures. And I mean, there's people that we're weaning off, using benzo tapers for days.
I'm getting into some of the training that I do, some of the things I talk about in training. But by adding a wheelchair to this person's ticket, if they don't need it, all you got to do is just not ask for it.
Yeah.
If you do need it, and we get down to the gate, guess who's getting on the plane first? Person in the wheelchair.
Less time to think. I like this, right? It's as smooth of a process as it can be. Less time to think.
A little bit of everything happening. I quit counting the interventions that I had facilitated about 2 years ago, and it was on top of 750 at that point. You learn things along the way about doing things like with the wheelchair and booking the tickets on my own charge card and getting reimbursed when I get back.
What's your success rate of getting them to the treatment center?
Great question. Glad you
Oh.
asked.
Oh,
Right now, I'm running about 85%.
holy fuck. I was
Yeah.
I would have put 50, 60% is probably like really good results, I'm guessing, in your world.
That's probably the national average. And I want to let you know that the name of my training is intervention from a spiritual perspective.
Cool. Yeah.
And so the reason my success rate is higher is, number one, I've been perfecting this model that I use for 19 years. And in addition to that, this will use this podcast as an example. I don't have a canned speech for a podcast. I don't have a canned speech for the situation that I'm walking into. For the most part, that's unknown. So what I did before this podcast and what I do before every meeting with a family or an AP is I make certain that I'm spiritually fit. I connect with what I call a higher presence on a daily basis. And in my case, it's undeniable with some of the things I've seen happen. I align myself with that on a daily basis. I did it right before my wife got me connected with you.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things you learn along the line. One of them is that I don't think my job's done until they're admitted. So I do the transport.
And how common is that amongst interventionists that they do the transport? That to me was wild.
Not that common.
I wouldn't think so.
Probably 50%.
Oh, higher than I would guess, but yeah, it's cool.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't have any real statistics. That's just an educated guess. But
you're saying like it's people do it, but it's not the rule of thumb. It's not the training, the rule of thumb. It's not necessarily something you offer.
There's transport companies.
Right. Oh, I've used, because I worked in a residential eating disorder treatment, Keith. So, and for teenagers, so a lot of those kids were getting transported. So, a different kind of addiction treatment that I worked in.
I have a model for adolescents interventions too. If we can't do it in the therapist's office with the parents and the therapist and everybody present, you got the wrong guy. Doing it that way in the therapist's office, I've never missed a single case. The preparation's there, and you stop and think about it, we really got him captive. Got the individual captive in, and here again, that bond is made. Just because I'm 40 years or 50 years older than you doesn't mean I don't know what's up. I was you most of my life. There's some other things that go with adolescent transports. You got to have a body cam. You got to take handcuffs, just plastic bracelets. Yeah. And the one thing that I've learned is you have one adolescent walk up to somebody and say, hey, this guy's kidnapped me. From that point forward, you get a piece of paper that says, I'm transporting this person.
Well, and I've actually had family of mine, Keith, who have used those kinds of like overnight snatch them from bed transport services to take them to these private residential centers. Now we never recommended that. Oftentimes they'd get taken from the medical hospital. Mm-hmm. And so that's its own separate bear, but that's out there, where they'll just like snatch kids in the middle of the night. It really doesn't start the treatment in any way that's going to be helpful, right? Like how can you gain therapeutic alliance when this person had no choice?
I prefer to do all my own transports.
Yeah.
It's too late in the game for me to change that. I think there's some good transport companies out there. Once I've established a relationship with the AP, regardless of whether it's an adolescent or a senior, doesn't matter. I feel like, personally, my job's not done until I get the guy to the front door and get him, most of the time, through the admissions process.
Where are some of the most common treatment centers you're connected to or that you take people? We've got a lot out here. Utah's big.
Most of the treatment centers that I refer to are either in Colorado or California. Mm. And here's why I like California. People say, why do you like California? First of all, it's not hard to get anybody to go this time of year.
Yeah.
Second of all, for every residential treatment center in LA, you can buy a house and make it a treatment center. There's one in Calabasas that I work with. But you can only have 6 clients. And now we got some intimacy going on where if you have the standard number of therapists per client, nationally is probably between 6 or 8
And
clients
any
per
in
therapist.
like residential level of care.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the caseload that most all therapists have in residential treatment. In California, they're 2 to 1,
Wow.
3 to 1 at worst.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's huge.
So they get a lot of individual care. I made a decision that I was gonna get established in California.
Yeah.
And my motivation for doing that is I was shocked to find out that there's a lot of guys out there and girls that are doing interventions and charging more than some treatment centers charge.
Yeah.
And
There's money out there, Keith.
they didn't
Boys
like
from
to
the
see
Midwest
me
like
show
you
up.
and me, we don't know about California money. You know?
They did not like seeing me show up in California. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I'm doing them for usually a third of what they charge out there, and I'm traveling a pretty good ways to get there. A lot of those guys, individuals that I met, I'm not gonna say the entire everybody that's an interventionist in the state of California is doing this, but most of the people that I have met that are interventionists in LA, I'm trying to do 1 a month.
Okay.
I'm trying to do 6. So there was a point in time when if I didn't do 6, I was trying to figure out who I pissed off, because I rely totally. I've got a website too, but I get a occasional lead from the website. My lead source comes from therapists and treatment centers, and I'm on the referral list for somewhere around 75 different treatment centers nationwide. There's some good treatment centers in Texas.
Yeah.
There is a good treatment center in Florida that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Good treatments. Singular good treatment center in Florida, the place where they probably just anecdotally need the most. Shameless plug. We'll include this information all up in the the podcast information, Keith. But that's loveinaction.us.com.
It is.
You need, that's the website. I'm on it right now, looking at the 2-day training that honestly I would love to go to. So just really cool. I'm sure, Keith, I would learn a ton, from your bag of tricks, man. I mean, you touched on this while we were just talking before, is that, you'd been trained in a handful of things, and your approach is an amalgamation of all those styles. And I think any good therapist type, which of course you are, should be learning from all the different experiences of other people and kind of turning what works best for them.
It is. And, I mentioned earlier that I'm 72 years old. And when you get that old, you start thinking about legacies. And the trainings themselves aren't really a big avenue of revenue for me. I'm not going to name names, but some of the people that do intervention trainings charge between $4,000 and $7,000 for that.
How much do you charge?
$599.
Great. You got a deal. I'll write my check. Let me know when the next training is.
It's in February.
Great.
But being 72 years old, being on the back 9 of my life, I want to make sure I hand it off right. And I want to teach people correctly.
Yeah.
And at this stage of my career, I'm still doing interventions, and I'm fortunate I don't have to work. I choose to work. It is a spiritual journey for me. Sure. And I feel like I was placed on this path, and I really didn't have a damn thing to do with it. And it's developed into almost a 20-year career. I want to hand it off right. And I don't believe you can convey something you don't have. Hence the significance of the spiritual aspect. You said you just looked at my training. It's intervention from a spiritual perspective. I believe, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Buddha or it's Jesus Christ or if it's a doorknob. I don't care. If you're not aligning yourself spiritually on a daily basis, it's hard to convey the fact you live a spiritual life. And the spirituality, sometimes I ask people, I said, most of the time when I'm working with a family, I look at them and say, can I ask you a personal question? And they always say yes. Say, are you spiritual? Generally, they say, yeah, I go to the Methodist church every Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I always follow that up with, I didn't ask if you were religious. I ask if you're spiritual. And most of the people say, I don't know the difference.
I was going to ask you if you would enlighten us on, in your world, what the difference is. Because I think in my generation, Keith, a lot of people will say that. They'll say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with being a Christian at the Methodist Church. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't misunderstand me.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to pick one. The difference for me spiritually is I don't need to go to a man-made building with a man-made steeple to make my connection with this higher presence that I call God, because everything else was taken. And I do it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly working on my own spirituality. And in my opinion, I live as a Christian. I've made this statement before, since I got sober and I started the spiritual path, I live like a monk.
Yeah.
I really don't, but
Yeah.
I live an amazing life, better than I've ever lived.
Keith, you mentioned when we were prepping that you're a believer of the big book, and I said the Bible, and you're like, no, the big book of AA, which is inherently a spiritual program. And I think there's people who struggle to get engaged with AA because they refuse to kind of accept that giving it up to a higher power, and we have to understand that we're helpless in the midst of treatment. But I can see very much how the 12-step type program has jived with you. Keith, I want to wrap because it's such a great story. So don't speed it up. But I want to wrap hearing you talk about how you became an interventionist and what that story was like, because it really moved me when we were talking before.
The last treatment center I went to, I was going to AA meetings when I got home, but there was a treatment center here that was indigent treatment center. At that time, it was called Iden Grove. Anybody that was in recovery could go by there 24 hours a day. I don't care if you needed another drunk to talk to at 2 o'clock in the morning, you could find one there. Yeah. And most of them were homeless, and it was a revolving door, 3 hots and a cot and a shower. I didn't tell you the whole story, but I had been doing volunteer work there, and normally I'd get there like at 8 o'clock, and a lot of times I wouldn't leave until 8 or 9 that night.
Yeah.
I just really come to understand that they crossed a line that I never crossed. That's the only difference between me and them.
Yeah.
We both drank the same way. I got on first name basis with most of these homeless guys. One day I was walking through this facility, and the director of the facility walked up to me and she said, "Keith, would you mind coming to my office?" And of course, I'm alcoholic from head to toe. The first thing I thought was, oh God, I've screwed this deal up too,
Yeah.
And so I walked in her office and she said, "I have a family that's looking for their loved one. Would you mind calling them? They would like to reunite with this individual, and you know him."
You know him the best, yeah.
I said, "No, I won't call them, but I'll go find him." And I stopped at the liquor store and bought the first half pint that I had bought in quite a while and stuck it in my back pocket, along with a bottle of 7-Up, and I went down on the river and I found him. His name was Kim, and he would not mind me saying that.
Yeah.
I went down on the river and found Kim and sat down with him, handed him the 7-Up, and I handed him the vodka. And he drank about half of the half pint, and he looked at me and he said, "Keith, you're the very last person I ever would have expected to bring me a drink on the river. What's the catch?" I looked at him and I said, "I need to ask you a question." He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Have you ever considered reuniting with your daughters and your mother?" And he said, "Yeah, but Keith, they don't want anything to have. They won't have anything to do with me." I said, "Kim, you may be wrong about that."
Yeah.
I said, "Here's what I'm willing to do. I've got this all prearranged. You have to go back to detox, and you have to stay until you're completely 100% detoxed.
Yeah.
It's not a 2-day camp out. It's probably going to take to get you detoxed 7 to 10 days.
Yep.
Then you can enter into the state-funded treatment center, which at that time was 30 days. It's 45 now. When you have completed your second week of treatment, I'm not talking about the 7 to 10 days.
Not the detox. Nope.
Not the detox.
Treatment.
I'm talking about the second week of treatment. I will buy your 3 daughters and your mother with miles, a round-trip ticket to come out here and see you." He said, "Are they okay with that?" I said, "I don't know yet. I'm going to call." I said, "Are you willing to do it? There's no point in me calling unless you're willing to do it." And he said, "Yeah, I am." He finished the half pint. By the way, he never opened the 7-Up. I took him straight to this indigent treatment center. They kept him 7 to 10 days, and I bought the tickets with miles for his 3 daughters and his mother, and picked him up at the airport and brought him to Greeley, Colorado. Was sitting in the lobby. They It was all prearranged with the treatment center. They knew they were coming. And I witnessed those 3 daughters and their mother reunite after they had not seen him for 10 years. And something happened, Stephen. It had to do with accomplishment. It had to do with self-worth. And I was successful in spite of myself when I was drinking. And I never did. I accomplished a lot in business,
Sure.
but I never accomplished anything that made me feel like that.
Feel
It was
purposeful.
almost as though when that happened, it was the reality of the fact that this is what I've been looking for. To feel exactly the way I feel right now was what I always look for in the bottom of a bottle of whiskey, opiates, and everything else. I wanted to feel the way I felt
Yeah.
in that occasion. From that point on, I'd go down there to volunteer, and inevitably, they'd have somebody that was looking for their loved one. HIPAA laws, they couldn't acknowledge to them that they'd ever even been there. I was a volunteer. I didn't work for them. So that developed into starting getting interested in workshops and conferences and that type of thing where you could get these CEs and CEUs, which were basically for counselors the same thing as college credit grades.
Sure.
Towards getting a CAC 1, CAC 2, or CAC 3. And by the time I got there, I didn't want to do it. But I was grateful for the knowledge. Don't misunderstand me.
Right. But it's interesting, Keith. I interviewed a really cool guy that's a life coach, and he did all the training to become an LPC, and was like, I would prefer to like not have the liability and be able to have these relationships go differently. So very similar for you. And I had said to him, I was like, I have some envy for you. You know, I enjoy skirting the rules of, you know, kind of that relationship stuff when I'm working with patients. And like you identified that, you're like, oh no, I'm not going to be comfortable just talking to him in an office. Like you, my friend, are comfortable getting in the shit, as we'd say. And a lot of therapist types are not comfortable getting in the shit, man. So good.
You'd be amazed at the number of people that come to my training that are therapists that think they want to add this to their practice, that maybe do one and say, this is not for me.
Nah. You're balancing a lot of forces, man. A lot of forces.
You said you were looking at my website. I don't have any initials behind my last name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a CIP. I'm a certified interventionist. I've been called a drunk whisperer.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I just had a patient, interestingly, in therapy who was like, well, yeah, I listened to you. You're a doctor. And I'm like, stupid doctors and wise janitors, man. Like, you know, we know that stuff. And that's awesome, you know, and I think you've leaned into that, which is like my strength is my experience and what I've learned from it. But my strength is my character. It's not the amount of school I went to or the degrees I have.
Right. Everything that I do is based on experience with all forms of drug, hallucinogenics, cocaine, marijuana, and in the end, Oxycontin, which is back then was real opiates.
Oh, yeah.
I was doing them so long ago, they didn't have a paraffin back in the 80 milligrams.
So you could, So what are you saying? You could IV? Crush them up like
drop them in a spoon and they'd dissolve nearly instantly with a big lighter. That being said, you combine that experience, a lifetime experience, to this last 19 years experience, and I can pretty well know what's going on in their head. It's just been an amazing journey, brother.
That's awesome, man. That's really the goal on this show, is to really help people be able to get out of their own heads and into the minds of people around them to help build empathy. And Keith, I've had to do that in my life, and I'm sure you have too. It's not something that we're inherently blessed with. You know, some people with good upbringings get it, but it's work to learn how to be empathetic and to learn to understand other people's thinking. And you've worked for it. I've worked for it. It's not something that comes naturally. And I feel like you, man, it is an absolute fucking blessing to be on the other side of that training.
Let me tell you the hardest thing that I had to learn how to be a listener.
I'm laughing because people in my life will be like, you're a therapist? Like people, you know, because I was a talker and obviously I still am. So are you. It's learning about being a listener.
That was probably I would catch myself and think, why don't you listen? You know, and spiritually, when I was making that connection, I was asking to get better at being a listener in that alignment time. And today I'm a pretty good listener. I'm also a follower of all them old school golfers. And the professionals that were playing for $10,000, that was a big prize money. Lee Trevino said something one day that pretty well described me. He said, when I go to bed at night, I can't wait to get up in the morning just to hear what I have to say. And
yeah, that's funny.
you know, it's been a learning process for me. Like I said, one of my biggest assets is this dark life that I led. I have considered taking myself out, only in using, never in sobriety.
Right. In the depths of it, you're stuck. There's no way out. It's where the brain and the heart and the soul go when you feel stuck.
And you know, somehow we convince ourselves that the world would be better off without us. You know, if there's anybody listening to this that has a loved one that has mentioned suicide, I have families all the time say that, oh, he's just doing that for attention. I take every mention of suicide totally serious. If it rolls around in his head long enough, it's going to become a good idea at some point.
Yeah.
And please don't assume they're doing it for attention.
Well, Keith, what we say on this show is that attention is not a dirty word. Like, you know, if it's like they're doing it for attention, correct. They need attention. And we have to teach them how to ask for that attention and ask for that help in different healthy ways. People are not taught, especially men, are not taught how to ask for help, especially when they're not struggling. It's not really culturally sanctioned in this country to ask for help. Of course, it's going to come out in these sideways, unhealthy, or honest ways. But when people are like, oh, they're doing it for attention, correct. They're saying they need attention. And we can do something healthy with that, and we can work with that. It's better than them not saying anything at all.
Probably 100% of the time, the mention of suicide is a cry for help. They've kind of got, with treatment centers these days, it's okay if they've talked about suicide. When they start getting concerned, the first question they ask is, has he left a note? Has she attempted suicide? The mention of it will get you in about any treatment center. But the action that follows sometimes will require a stabilization before you go to a treatment center. You know, this show isn't about suicide, but
yeah, we talk about it. It comes up, Keith. Not this episode, but suicidal thoughts and addiction go together. Peanut butter and jelly.
They do, and I think we have to take it serious rather than it doing for attention. Maybe they are doing it for attention.
Yeah.
But attend to it.
Data does not, data doesn't back that as much, right? We know male suicide rates, and we know men are more likely to use violent means and use guns instead of pills and complete than attempt. And, we know all that data. And Keith, especially in this up and coming generation, the rates of everything are just so bad that hopefully we turn that, like I try to, into, yes, they are doing it for attention. That is okay. It does not need to drive anger or whatever it drives in people. They feel manipulated when someone mentions suicide, and it's like, look, this is what they have. This is the tool they have. This is what they know. People are doing the best they can with what they have at any given time. That's all they've got as their coping skill right now. So, get over yourself and understand this person needs help and call Keith Bradley and make it happen. Yeah. Keith, it has been such a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's an honor to be on your podcast.
I would like to wrap up with, as you said to our boy Cam, a personal question. Okay. What do you think about the Broncos and how they're doing this year? What do you think it's going to work out to be?
I think they have found a franchise quarterback.
Yeah. Paired with Peyton. Think so.
It looks as though they're going to be a wild card.
Yeah.
And I have hopes that can get them to the playoffs. But at this stage of the game, with the progress they've made this year, next year we're coming with a vengeance.
Yeah. They've got a couple good young corners, Riley Moss and Patrick Surtain Jr. Sutton has always been a stud, just in a crappy offense. Nix he's a mature, well-spoken, thoughtful young man. And because he played so long in college, he's 25? kind of like when Joe Burrow was coming out. He was older, so they were poised for that right away. I'm not a Sean Payton guy. I think he's kind of a dick, but like, it seems to be working.
Yeah, he's got a style that's different than most.
Yeah.
My favorite comment that Bo Nix has ever made was he threw an interception at a really bad time in a game early on. And of course, the media was waiting for him in the locker room, and they said, "Hey, tell us about what happened when you threw that interception, when you was in the red zone and all this kind of stuff." He said, "Well, I took the snap, I dropped back, and I threw it to the wrong team."
I didn't even hear that quote, man. I love that.
What a great answer.
Well, he's in a good position to be confident because his job is secure. Like, there's nobody breathing down his neck. He knows it's his job. He succeeded enough. I'm sure Peyton's put that confidence in him. But I'll tell you what, to be as a rookie, to have that kind of comedic poise and just honesty, accountability. Nobody ran the wrong route. They didn't disguise coverage. They didn't blow a blocking assignment. He's like, I just threw a pick.
Put the responsibility on anybody other than himself.
No. Yep. Yeah, that's really good. That's cool. That's cool mentality. And yeah, people seem to be stoked out here. I'm a Bengals fan, so ups and downs, and of course I'm riding with them. But it's good for the city, when they're doing well. And I've adopted the Nuggets as my primary basketball team. So giving up your NFL team is just tough.
See, I was born and raised in Kansas, so I was a Chiefs fan for a long time. And back then, it was like having a job to be a fan of the Chiefs. Yeah. Now, of course, everybody's jumped on the Mahomes wagon.
Yeah.
And I think he's a phenomenal quarterback. Maybe the best we've ever seen. Who knows?
Yeah. It's easy to be a Chiefs fan. Those sons of bitches. All right. Before I get on that tirade, Keith, this was so great and really appreciate this. I learned a lot. And I hope everybody else did too. So, we'll be back after the break with our Bromotions Hall of Fame. So we appreciate you, man. You're a Bromotions Hall of Famer in my book. And I look forward to talking with you soon.
I appreciate the opportunity very much. Thanks, Steve.
Super stoked to induct legend of the screen and stage, Daniel Radcliffe, best known as Harry Potter, into the Bromotions Hall of Fame. Our boy Daniel, born July 23rd, 1989 in London, England. He is the only child of Marcia and Alan, who both served as agents in the talent business. Nepo baby, am I right? He got his first job in 1999, starring in the Charles Dickens, the film version of David Copperfield. And that actually led to, the director, Christopher Columbus, who directed the Harry Potter movies, seeing Daniel in that role and handpicking him to play Harry Potter. They wanted an unknown guy, a British kid, to represent the role, and he seemed to feel like Daniel fit that perfectly. It was not all roses as a kid for Daniel. He struggled with dyspraxia. Maybe you've heard of the term dyslexia, being difficulty with visuals and reading. Dyspraxia is difficulty with our motor coordination. Mild case, he calls it, but still something that's impacted his life, his coordination, and his ability to perform things on set during Harry Potter. Pretty well known that after his time in Harry Potter, he wanted to transition into the Broadway stage. In 2011, he made his debut in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. He was quoted in the USA Today after that performance as, Radcliffe ultimately succeeds not by overshadowing his fellow cast members, but by working in conscientious harmony with them and having a blast in the process. So really beloved by his peers and the people he was performing with, even though you could understand he's the most famous person on that stage by a country mile. Really hit a peak in 2023. He was in a famous musical, Merrily We Rolled Along, where he won a Tony. But these are not the reasons that we're inducting him to the Bromotions Hall of Fame. A huge philanthropist and a notable political advocate, Daniel Radcliffe is. His favorite charity that he funds most of his things towards is the Demelza House, which is a children's hospital in Sittingbourne, Kent in England. He also won the Hero Award in 2011 as an LGBTQ youth advocate by the Trevor Project, which is a big name in terms of advocacy in that world. In 2012, he was quoted as saying, "I'm an atheist and I'm a militant atheist when religion starts impacting legislation." So I included that here not to start a war on religion, but to note that we share the same thing on this podcast, which is we say there is nothing religious or political about being kind, right? And I agree that when, religion starts impacting politics and dictating those kinds of things, that we really got to wonder what's going on here, make sure we're on the right track. But the main reason we're inducting Daniel at this moment is because he has struggled with alcohol use. And he's been sober now for a good long time, but he became more vocal in the late 2010s talking about his struggles with alcohol and mostly binge drinking as it related to his fame. He did a great interview on the Off-Camera show with Sam Jones in 2019, and we're going to share a few clips from that.
Yeah, some. But there is like an awareness that I really struggled with, particularly in my late teens, when I was going out to places for the first time, where you would like feel, and again, it could have largely been in my head, but you would feel watched when you went into a bar, when you went into a pub, and then, in my case, the quickest way of forgetting about the fact that you were being watched was to get very drunk, and then as you get very drunk, you become aware that, people are watching more now because now I'm getting very drunk, so I should probably drink more to ignore that more. And so it gets into, you get into it can affect your psyche, and you sort of have to, and I think that's something, as I said, there is no blueprint for starting young and working stuff out.
Right.
That's why, whenever people having a go at Justin Bieber, drag racing cars or whatever, I'm always like, yeah, but I don't know, stuff could be super crazy for him right now. I don't
There's an empathy because unless you're on that side of it, there's no way you can understand
you don't quite know how kind of overwhelmed it's possible to get in it, or to, and it's also, part of the thing is the expectation that you should just be delighted all the time. You have a great job, you're wealthy, you don't have a right to ever feel sad or to not be excited about the whole thing all the time. And I think that's a pressure as well, because if you suddenly start to feel like, man, if I am just feeling some human emotion of sadness, does that mean I'm doing this wrong? Does that mean I'm not good at being famous or not good at living my life? But the thing I'm so lucky about is that I love it, and I ultimately love the work, and that's the thing I'll always go back to. But there are some people that don't
yourself out of that spiral, because that was probably the fulcrum in your life where it could have gone either way, right?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it took a few years and it took a couple of attempts, but I think I have been just unbelievably lucky with the people that I've had around me at certain times in my life. And I met some really key people, some of them actors, some of them not, who just gave me great advice and really cared for me. And ultimately, it was my own decision. I woke up one morning after a night going this is probably not good. And I don't miss it generally, now at all. I really, and I know, and that varies for some people really still do, and some people don't. And when I think of the sort of chaos I used to invite into my life, I'm I'm really much happier now. And I think
great clips there from Daniel, and just noting on some of those, right? Child stardom. We've seen this with Robert Downey Jr., could name a lot. Again, he mentioned Justin Bieber. I mean, it's inherently traumatic. There's a lot of attention that, especially as a kid and a young adult, you're just not ready for. And so it's going to fuck your mind up. It just is. And especially that point that Daniel made, which is the expectation of loving it and being so happy, contrasted with the reality of the pressure and the attention. And Daniel talked about the awareness of being watched in public, especially when you're as famous as he was as a kid. It's jarring, and I can't understand what that's like. And I doubt most people in our audience or anyone in our audience really could. And finally, he talked about, the decision to get sober was inevitably his. You can have family support. We just talked about interventions, but also noting that recovery is really, truly the most difficult thing that most people will do in their lives. And if you're not motivated yourself, then it is going to be very difficult for it to stick. All right. So really great. And Daniel, really happy to have you in the Bromotions Hall of Fame. Good luck with the rest of your career and your ongoing sobriety. We'll be back to wrap up after the break. All right. We'll wrap up as we do, guys, is with our source citing and our takeaways for the week. And so from the New Year's resolution conversation, all the stats that I pulled there are from a survey that's done by the APA, American Psychiatric Association. You can find that article on psychiatry.org. It was from December of 2024 leading up to the 2025 resolutions. Keith, just want to mention again his website, Love in Action, and you can find his information not only as an interventionist, but the trainings he does as well to help people get into that really, really cool field. And finally, used Entertainment Tonight, used Sam Jones's podcast with Daniel Radcliffe on there, and of course, always Wikipedia to help get some of the background information. What are our 3 takeaways? Okay, this week. So one from the New Year's resolutions is New Year's resolutions are hard. Okay. People will joke that they're destined to fail. So we want to set smart goals like we talked about, and also make sure that we're kind to ourselves on days or weeks where we're not meeting those goals. All right. The only key to success here is if you see this as a lifestyle change, not necessarily just something you're doing this year or this month, that we're seeing it as a long-term and healthy change. With Keith, sometimes we need help from our friends, okay? And it takes those loved ones close to us, and it takes those people sometimes to help rally when we're in a tough spot. And so making sure that you're taking feedback from your loved ones when it comes to our behaviors, and being open to feedback. And finally, with the BHoF, hey, we're seeing a theme here: child stardom and early trauma, early attention, early confusion in that way really, really, really drives a lot of anxiety and negative emotions. So we're seeing this theme of child stars with substance abuse problems. And I think everybody here can understand how much pressure that is, And so we'll end our week as we will in our first show of 2025. Everybody, when you're out there in the world this week, let's be kind and gentle. See y'all next time.